Hello and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show on today, February 16th, 2017. I'm Eric Devin, and joining me, as always, are Nathan Staples and Adam White. Before we look ahead to Matchday 26, we are going to take a lull, which is once again in our presence after a good 2 or 3 months off. And on Wednesday, Paris Saint-Germain opened French League's knockout stage campaigns with a 4-0 thrashing of visiting Barcelona. It's probably fair to say that this eclipses even the extra time defeat of Chelsea as PSG's biggest moment of the QSI era. There's so many positives to take from this match, and the play of Rabiot, Maria, Kimpembe, Verratti. Nathan, what made the biggest difference for you on Tuesday night?
Desire, maybe, being one. Positivity. They looked like a completely different team than especially the one we saw against Monaco a couple of weeks ago. You couldn't say this was the same team. They were absolutely terrific from start to finish. They didn't let up. They didn't have a moment's pause. They didn't rest on any of their laurels being 1-0 up or 2-0 up. They just kept going, and they were excellent. I thought you've mentioned the majority of the names, but I thought Trapp was decent, although he was only called on occasionally. The defensive pair was absolutely sensational. Kimpembe was unbelievable in this game. It was a real coming out party. We've said how good he's been this season, but this was absolutely terrific against one of the best players in the world, Messi. He didn't give him any inch of space. He was great against Suarez as well. That front line really didn't get a sniff all night because of those defenders. I thought Meunier was very good on the right back position. I thought he was great attacking. I thought he was great defending. I thought he worked really excellently against Neymar, who was probably Barcelona's best player, really, but he still struggled to get everyone else involved in the game. Midfield was. The amount of times we've said their midfield hasn't been good enough this season, what an unbelievable difference they made in this game. They were the pinnacle. They were the real driving force. Rabiot was super. Rabiot, in that slightly more reserved role occasionally, he was joining attacks at will, but he was getting back when needed. He was all over the pitch. He was almost like the memes about N'Golo Kante sort of appearing out of nowhere. Rabiot was that player on this game. He was absolutely superb. Verratti, especially in the first half, was controlling things like Iniesta in his heyday. He was superb. He kept the ball well. He was creative. He was trying to drive the ball forward, do things differently. He was absolutely sensational. And then the forward players, Di Maria has been excellent in the last couple of weeks, and we mentioned on Monday that the Draxler coming in has really forced him to go to the next level, and he was absolutely superb in this game. He was a bother. He was a nuisance. Cavani was excellent movement-wise and took his goal very well. Draxler kept on getting in the box and kept on bothering the defence. I don't think I've seen a better performance from PSG in a long, long while. They were absolutely terrific. And kudos to Unai Emery. His tactics were excellent. He didn't allow their midfield to get the ball. He forced PK and Umtiti to play, which made them nervous. It made them tentative. They didn't allow any time on the ball when it did go longer to the front three. Superb all around. And it almost felt, I don't know what you thought, but it almost felt like the moment where the team have bought into Unai Emery. They seem to have got exactly what he wanted. They understood the tactics that he wanted to play, the ideas he wanted to bring forward, and for the first time, at least it seemed, or at least from a witness's point of view, they fully bought into that. And I don't know what you thought, Eric, but I thought it just finally seemed to have clicked, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is something that I think that really close observers of French football will notice, that this is a different PSG. They've evolved. I mean, and this is the thing, that Emery has the faith in these young players to bring them on. I mean, honestly, if we think about the way Laurent Blanc used players, even to the point that Ancelotti and to some extent Kambawara used players as well, there wasn't a trust of youth. I think that if we had seen Verratti come off injured last season or in years past, we might have seen a change of formation, a change of tactics. Maybe, I don't know, Matuidi would have played as a 2 with Rabiot, and Ben Arfa would have played as a 10. He wouldn't have brought on Christopher Nkunku. I mean, let's face it. It was 3-0 at that point, but had Barca scored an away goal, 3-1 is a lot different of a scoreline in knockout football than is 4-0. And I think that showing that trust, for example, and showing the trust in Kimpembe not to play with the formations as Blanc had last year as well. I would think about that Manchester City match when Verratti was absent, and He played that bizarre 3-5-2. There's the trust that he's exhibiting in these young players is what could potentially take this team to the next level. I mean, it's not perfect, but in terms of its scope on the season. But on Tuesday night, PSG were pretty much just about perfect, and it's down to those young players. I mean, the other thing too. I mean, thinking about Rabiot, he gets a booking 4 minutes into the match, 3 minutes into the match, or if we've seen that before, the Coupe de la Ligue final and a handful of other occasions that he gets an early booking, then gets himself sent off unnecessarily. And I don't know about you, Nathan, but for me, I see Rabiot get that booking, I'm like, oh crap, here we go again. we're against, right? I mean, that's the initial reaction. Yeah, that he's going to get sent off again with a silly foul. And it didn't happen. He played with an absolutely radiant confidence and was doing fantastically well, getting forward, tracking back, shielding the defense. I think that Di Maria's goals, especially the one from open play, certainly get the plaudits. But for me, the way Rabiot protected that defense, I mean, that was absolutely magnificent. And he has had that in his locker, but it just takes a matter of trust, because I think that the old Rabiot, or at least the Rabiot under the former managers of PSG, it doesn't play with that confidence, doesn't play with that vivacity, and that's something that can really take this team forward. I mean, it's not going to be easy if PSG have a Bayern Munich or a Real Madrid in the next round, but seeing them play with that amount of confidence, that amount of brio, we haven't seen that this season. And the personnel it's incorporated at the same time is just really impressive. So, well done to these young players. Well done to Unai Emery for placing his faith in them and not trying to, jimmy with things as we've seen managers do in the past to the team's detriment. And I wanted to ask you also, Nathan, what your thoughts were on Barcelona. They were, to be frank, awful. But what went wrong for Luis Enrique? Starting Rakitic, should he have changed the formation without Alex Vidal as an orthodox right back?
Yeah, it was an odd one, wasn't it? I think I watched Revista just before the game. Alexis Vidal's injured for 4 months, I think, so that's why he didn't start. But Sergio Roberto was awful. I don't think he's a right back, for starters, and he was so exposed so often. He was really, really poor, and he put so much pressure on his defense. I mentioned this on Twitter as well. I can't believe if you'd sent me physical photo evidence that Sergio Busquets played that game, and I'm a big fan of Busquets. I think he's excellent. But I don't know where he was for 90 minutes. I've never seen him push so far up the field. I've never seen him sort of try and be in a real central area to try and do something. He's such an excellent cleaner and sweeper sort of player in front of a defence and such a good distributor of a ball from that area. I don't know where he was. He left his defence exposed so often that I can't believe I saw such a bad performance from him. And it sort of fell apart from around him there. Andre Gomez was completely ineffective. So you question why he didn't start someone like Rakitic, because I'm a huge fan of Ivan Rakitic. I think he's a fabulous player, and he's so creative, and he can really run games when you allow him to. Iniesta had a real off night. I've not seen him play that poorly before. Messi seemed to be nudged off the ball every so often, and he just didn't seem up for it. After about the third goal came in, he just wasn't really bothered. I think the only player that, like I mentioned previously, that can really have a semblance of positivity about is maybe Neymar. I thought at least he tried. At least when he got the ball, he wanted to try and do something, but no one around him wanted to be involved. But the defenders were standoffish, but Barcelona defenders tend to be, because they have a good shield in front of them, allowing them to wait and make those right decisions. And I'm surprised that more people haven't picked up about Busquets' play, because he was awful. I don't think I've seen a worse defensive midfield display. I can't remember one. I can't pick one out of my mind, because he was abysmal. And
it was back last weekend.
Yeah, but it's such a strange thing to say, because
you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was either he was pushed too far up or dropped too far back. I mean, there were other times in the match where he was playing deeper than either PK or MTT. and not coming out to meet that challenge, whether it's Draxler cutting inside, Di Maria cutting inside, Rabiot or Verratti with the ball at their feet. And that was exposing those two center backs and forcing them to make more tackles. I mean, I think we saw leading up to Mtiti's challenge on, was it Draxler that led up to the free kick goal?
Yes.
That's a lack of positional play on Busquets' part. I mean, yes, the ball was lost on that right flank there, but the defensive midfielder should be picking up that run as Mtiti tracks back, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Busquets, I think, is what, 29, 20, 28? He's not.
I think he's 28. I think I will double check as you carry on.
Yeah, he's not an old player, and I mean, maybe it's a matter of exhaustion. Maybe it's a matter of nerves. I mean, the thing is, even though Barcelona had more possession last or Tuesday night, you're still seeing from this team on a regular basis, PSG, that is, an ability to keep the ball, an ability to play with possession when the situation fits. And they don't. Barcelona may just not necessarily see that as often in La Liga, and to see a team play in a style not just similar to the way that they played, in the recent past, that tiki-taka, keeping the ball, short passes, I think may have left them at loose ends. They didn't recognize how to deal with that, because teams don't, even teams that are on level footing with them in terms of talent, which PSG certainly are, in my opinion, they don't have that. They don't approach the match with that same directness. They tend to approach the match a little bit more directly. I'm not saying that PSG weren't direct, but that keeping the ball and seeking to frustrate Barcelona, I think, left the team with a lot of gaps. And Barcelona themselves were chasing shadows, and they weren't able to, when they won the ball back, to make those short little passes and to link things in a way that showed the cohesion that we tend to expect from Barcelona. So it was, they couldn't react.
Yeah.
Andre
That
Gomez
was
was awful,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think that they came out in half time. You would have thought they got a rollicking, and they folded instead of galvanized. It was strange.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the decision to start Gomez over Rakitic was strange as well. I think that Rakitic offers more going forward. He's able to keep the ball better. I also think he's a better tackler as well. And so, having to contend with Matuidi on that left side of central midfield, it doesn't make sense to me that, Matuidi had next to nothing to do defensively. So he was able to join the attack consistently, making runs and pinning back Roberto and drawing the other defenders out of position. And you wouldn't have had that. I mean, Rakitic had been on the pitch from the start. I think things could have been a little bit different. I'm not trying to take anything away from PSG's performance, but I don't know. Would you disagree? Gomez is a decent enough player, but what is he really? Defensive midfielder, a central midfielder? I don't think he's clever enough or orthodox enough defensively to really warrant a position in Barcelona's best first choice 11.
Yeah, he's more of a deep line playmaker, isn't he? Really, more than anything, and you sort of get lost in the shuffle when Busquets is too far up, so you're maybe sitting a little bit too far back, and he's not a particularly good tackler or breaker up of play. I thought he was decent at Valencia, but that's almost the role that Iniesta's playing now, isn't it? As that sort of, as he's got older, he's not quite got the energy to get up and down the field as much, so he's receding a little bit. So there was no real link between attack and defense, which might explain. Attacking midfield. So that might explain why Busquets felt the need to be further forward, and then it all capitulates from there. So I don't know. There was a lot of odd decisions, and whether Luis Enrique stays at Barcelona, I don't want to stay on them too long, but it's an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah, I just I know Barcelona have had an uneven season, but this is really, I'm struggling to think, whether I've ever seen them play so poorly. In a match that I've watched personally, I'm sure there are other performances, but anyway, well done to PSG, well done to these young players, well done to Emery. I think that this is, some level of indication that I think is really going to put the team in good stead for the rest of the season. Catching Monaco in the league is another story, but I think this was, even if they get handed a tough opponent in the quarterfinals, I think this goes a long way to making PSG's season go from poor to successful.
Yeah, real statement.
So just to finish off, though, on this match, let's talk about the role of Thiago Silva going forward. He was dropped from the match. There have been some reports circulating that he was dropped because he didn't feel mentally ready for the match. Other reports say he did have an injury. So for you, Nathan, looking at the money on offer in China, in England, this player could be worth 30 or 40 million euros, even at the age of 33 this year. Now, given, of course, the price of center backs writ large across Europe, does he keep his place in the team next year, or should PSG make money on him while he's still a sellable asset, given how well Kimpembe and Marquinhos performed? Or am I totally overhyping this?
I think they definitely showed you the future and what they can be. It's a tough one. I know a lot of people still think Silva's regressing in bits, but I still really like Thiago Silva. I think he's still, while the pace is slowly starting to ebb away, which made him world class, let's be honest, because I always think a defender that has all those skills plus an extra yard of place makes him such a dangerous asset, because he not only stops mistakes from happening in the first place, if he makes the slightest mistake, so you can recover from it, which is frightening. He's a good leader. He clearly has a hold on the dressing room, as we've sort of mentioned before. I don't know. What can you get? My question would be: can you get someone better in? Because even as cover, if he's willing to accept that, or maybe not as many games.
Yeah, I think that's what's underlying my question is.
Yeah.
What kind of we know his ego, we know his attitude. Is he going to be a distraction? I mean, would you start him in the return leg?
Oh, good question. It depends on how defensive I'm willing to go, because that's also the problem with Barcelona is that we say this ties over with 4-0, but we've seen Barcelona score 4 goals before. It's not an impossible task for a team like that who can score so freely if you allow them to. I would probably set up the same way as I did, because a goal at the Nou Camp is completely tie over at any point. So be positive about it. Don't worry too much about it. So I wouldn't change a thing, really, if you can afford to. Obviously, it depends on players' fitness and a bit like that. But why not? They showed you why they deserve to play that game. And if I'm Silva, I understand that. But going forward, unless you can get someone of equal measure, even if he does have to start more games often than not, because he's still not it's not a bad defender to have, even, and money's less of a worry for Paris Saint-Germain, other than maybe financial fair play. Unless you can get someone worthy of a replacement, then I keep him in-house.
No, I would tend to concur. It's just, I don't know. It's so intriguing to see a team that has sort of struggled at times with roles defensively. And we think about how many matches Alex played when he was with the team. I mean, it's this team is David Luiz. I mean, this team has not really had a European champion level central defense, but I think that perhaps in Kimpembe and Marquinhos, and another season, that could be there. I mean, and also the way that they play off each other. They're both good tacklers. They're both quick. They're both decent headers of the ball, and not on Silva's level, not on Luis's level. But yeah, I think there could be really something there. And I think the handling of those players is as they're rightly going to have a little bit more. They're going to want to be in the first team a little bit more now, or particularly Kimpembe after this performance. So anyway, once again, well done to PSG. We'll move briefly through the Europa League fixtures before moving on to Matchday 26. Adam is unfortunately unable to join us tonight. Some technical difficulties. We do hope to have him back next Thursday. So, Nathan, we're going to speak about Lyon's trip to Alkmaar. The hosts were defeated 4-1. Lyon played very well. A brace from Lacazette, goals from Luka Toussaint and Jordan Ferry. And in this, Lyon played a diamond 4-4-2, but Sergi Darder was all but invisible. However, in that playmaking role, Lucas Toussaint's goal showed how he can perhaps add the right blend of physicality and attacking impetus. We've seen Lyon go through so many formations this year, but I think perhaps in this, and it really ended up being functionally more of a 4-3-1-2 than a diamond. I know that might be semantics, but there was a lot of space between the midfield three and Darder at times. Is this something they can build on? I mean, you've got Maxime Gonalon has been in good form all season. It allows a little bit more freedom to Corentin Tolisso. Toussaint can contribute At times, he offers a bit more of a physical presence than does Darder or Jordan Ferry. And so if you have an appreciation of this formation, if you think that there's something to be said for it, how do you construct it? How do you line up? Because I don't think Darder is a playmaker. I think we can agree on that. Do you play Valbuena behind the front two? Do you play Fekir behind Lacazette and Depay? How would you build this?
There's so many little four stones, isn't there, in formations for Leon this season? It seems like the third or fourth one we're going through. I always agree with you that you need to give Tolisso a little bit more freedom. He's such a really excellent player when he's allowed the ability to move forward and back. And I think finally, Toussaint being a more defensive-minded player on occasion, although he can obviously support, and he did well in that, and his goal showed that he can do. He's maybe finally the right answer to the Ferry Darder question of who do you play for Tolisso. Ferry's, I don't think, good enough personally to do either role. Darder's good going forward, but can't track back enough to cover Tolisso's wanders forward, because Tolisso's maybe not the best consciously defensively. Maybe this is the right mix. Maybe that's the best midfield three. If you play a 4-3-3 as well, I think the issue with the 4-4-2 for me, or a diamond or something like that, or is even if you play Valbuena or Fekir behind the strikers, I think that's eliminating someone like Valbuena, who's played terrifically this season. I think Depay sometimes works better from a wider role. I think so, unless you're going to play Fekir as the second striker instead of Depay and have someone behind them, I don't know. I don't know what you think to this, but I'd quite like to see like a 4-2-3-1 in all honesty now. I'd like to see try and play Tolisso in a freer role in the middle of the park, not necessarily right next to the striker, but a more advanced role with Toussaint and Gonalon sitting a little bit more, but also Toussaint able to, them both like a normal sort of old-fashioned 4-4-2 centre midfield pairing of them deciding when to go, when not to go. And then that takes the best out of Valbuena, who's been excellent this season. It keeps Lacazette in that role, but players coming around him. Maybe Depay on the other wing, maybe Fekir, depending on who's playing the better at that point. I want to see what you think of maybe that, because it's Genesio is going to play with this formation until he's eventually sacked, isn't he? So he's going to try and find something to happen. But I'd quite like to see that. I think that probably gets the best out of most of your players.
I don't disagree with that. But I think the $64,000 question there is what happens to Depay. I mean, obviously, Valbuena, on form is done fantastically well. Are you going to drop Fekir, given his reputation in the team, and given also the culture? I mean, let's face it, this team has built its success, particularly over the past 6 or 7 years, on academy players. And we've seen, and I wrote a piece on the site earlier this week that we've seen other players that have some modicum of experience coming in. They don't have a level of looks like Adam has joined us. They don't have a welcome, Adam. They don't have a level of cohesion within the team, and I think not necessarily in terms of how they play on the pitch, but how they're perceived in the locker room. Because I think that the transfers that Leon have got right in the recent past, and again, right is a relative term, but let's face it. Bringing in Valbuena, I think we can say it, but by this point, that's gone right. Christophe Jallet, he's a little past it right now, but he was Ligue 1 Team of the Year his first season in Leon. That definitely came off well. Jeremy Morel's been a decent servant, but players that have come in at this sort of younger stage, it's Depay, it's Lindsay Rose, it's Darder, that are still young and still have promise of a future ahead of them, but have played lots of matches, 100 matches for their first team. I know Darder hadn't played quite that many, but he was a starter for Malaga for 2 seasons. And I kind of wonder, with that, how it subsumes, how those players are able to subsume their egos. I think that to me gets to the heart of why this could potentially be an issue. Because if you play that 4-2-3-1, I think that's great. I think that Tolisso is a second striker, gives Leon more of an aerial threat they don't have. I mean, all those attacking players, Cornet, Gazal, Fekir, Lacazette, I think the tallest one might be Cornet's 5'9", 5'10", but having Tolisso to be an additional aerial threat, I'm not suggesting Leon play Route 1 football, but it just gives them a different look should they need to play in that way. So I think you're right, Nathan, but Would Leon do that, given the money they played for Depay, given his reputation? I think no. But the other side of that coin is, this player is going to be shoehorned into the first team. Claudio Bovu is another example. I know he's not quite as young as Depay and the other players I mentioned were, but he plays with us. He played with a certain amount of selfishness and was put into the team, perhaps not with a good regard to the rhythm of the way that the team played, and Leon suffered as a result. And I really wonder whether, however you want to form this team, whether Depay deserves a place in this team, no matter what the situation is in terms of formation and player personnel.
Very quickly, I think my hope is that he's there almost like Draxler was at PSG to push the other players, make them perform. If they don't perform, then it's Depay, and if he doesn't perform, then bring someone else. There's plenty of options there now. Make them compete for it. But that's my opinion.
No, I don't disagree. But at the same time, I mean, Draxler has really put his head down and worked. I think, the way he's not playing selfishly. We saw him on Tuesday tearing all over the pitch, dragging defenders out of position. His movement is incredible. I mean, that's not something we'd seen him get down and do. Even at the best of times when he was in Germany. So I think that we need to see that kind of humbleness from Depay to have the other players accept him in terms of the way they think they approach things. So finally, we're going to speak briefly about Saint-Etienne's 3-0 loss to Manchester United. So, Adam, tell me, is there life in this tie, or was an away goal imperative?
Sorry for my lateness, by the way, everybody. Yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah. Watching the game, I felt like Saint-Etienne, it was a little bit of an opportunity missed. They started very well. The first half was brilliant. I thought, they were very unlucky to be that 1-0 goal down with that deflected free kick, which sort of trickled in. Perhaps Perrin thought Ruffier had it covered and didn't react as quickly as he might have done. And at that point, sort of at halftime, you felt like 1-1 would have been a sort of a fair result, a fair reflection of that first half, given Hamouma caused some issues. Moni Pake used his pace quite well. Jorginho was in and out of the game as well. So, they very much held their own in that first half, and they'll be very disappointed to go in, having conceded that goal and perhaps not got an equaliser. They had a couple of half openings and were very much in the game, especially in the latter half of that first half. But second half, perhaps Manchester United's quality showed a little bit. Saint-Etienne legs tired a little bit. And obviously Zlatan had to get his customary, glut of goals against Saint-Etienne. He can't help scoring against them. It was almost inevitable that he'd get that hat-trick in the end. I felt like in that second half, even if they'd got that goal, though, there was a couple of that Roux had that chance that he sort of dinked just over the bar. If he'd taken that 3-1, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But if Manchester United come to Le Chaudron next week, Saint-Etienne, obviously, they're needing one goal for United, kills it dead, whatever. They need to score 3 in any instance, even take extra time. I just can't see them doing that. They're not a team that scores goals. Even if they went 4-4-2 and tried to be a bit more open and played 2 up front, I still think it's very, very unlikely. So a percentage chance, I'm sort of saying less than 1 at the moment for them, unfortunately. But that penalty at the end was such a silly tackle from Kevin Telfer Catherine, who I felt to give the penalty away, of course, for Ibra's hat-trick. And I just felt that was a really silly challenge that he just didn't need to be making there. But especially if Ibra was going nowhere with the ball way back to goal, there were 2 or 3 defenders around him, and it was just inviting, Ibra to go down and give that penalty away. So perhaps showing their lack of the lack of experience in Europa League a bit there, Saint-Etienne. So I have a feeling that 3-0 kind of kills it, which is such a shame because it will still be a great atmosphere at Saint-Etienne next week. But with the tie alive, you really felt like there would have been a massive occasion at Saint-Etienne, and the fans had a great time anyway. They were doing the Poznan into injury time, even though they were 3-0 down. But it kind of killed the tie, which is a shame. But Saint-Etienne can be semi-proud with aspects of this bit. There are still positives to take. So unfortunately, I think that's them out. But I think perhaps it's a learning experience for a number of players and perhaps for Gautier as well.
All right. So that was our European wrap-up. We are going to move on now into our Matchday 26 matches. We did not do so well last week. Even though Andres was in for Adam, we got 1 correct prediction.
Oh no!
Score. It was the correct result.
Tough analysis, everyone.
Nathan picked PSG defeating Bordeaux. Everybody else got their matches wrong. That was Leon Bloch to Guingamp.
That's the one we get right. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, we had the 4 matches we talked about. I think we had Lyon Guingamp. Nobody picked a Guingamp win. We had Lille Angers. Nobody picked an Angers win. And we had Rennes Nice, and then nobody picked a draw in that. So moving on, we have I think 4 matches that are I think are pretty interesting. They're a lot of them involve teams we don't speak about a whole lot, and I think it'll be fun to take a look at that. So moving on, we're going to start with Marseille hosting Rennes. Now, Nathan, this first question comes to you. No Bafétimbi Gomis. He's out for about a month, maybe more. Now, Buenos Aires played as a false 9 before. Is this the way to go so the team can maintain that 4-3-3, or should he go with Antoine Rabiot up top? How should Rudy Garcia approach this match in terms of his attacking players?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, it's what we said on Monday when Gomis was announced that he's got that injury for, I think it's 3 to 6 weeks, which is a body blow for Marseille, really. They haven't got anyone to play in that position. You mentioned Rabiot, but that's a risk at best. That's probably the nicest thing to say about that opportunity. But Buenos Aires as a false 9, I really don't like Buenos Aires as a false 9. I think he's not good at it at all. He's got pace, yes, and he's quick, but he doesn't think of runs in behind very often. He doesn't make clever runs from those kind of positions. He doesn't do what like Hamuma did tonight, which is come close to the ball, run into the channels often and bits like that, and really cause nightmares for defenders because they're not pressed up against you, which can really frustrate centre-backs. I think it's a massive decision for Garcia for what he decides to do. What would I do? I would stick with me because this is a strange one as well. They've got so many players that are really good in those attacking areas. I'm thinking you could quite easily move Sanson further forward, as in maybe on a wing. Maybe stick Cabella in that number 9, the false 9 role, because he's maybe a little bit more comfortable as a number 10. Maybe something like that. And then Tovan, and then stick Lopez closer to them with Zambo and Guisa and Van Queer behind those two. Maybe something like that, just because then it gets more players around the ball. Yes, you've not really got a presence in the box, but especially someone like Tovan, well, obviously Payet as well, so you could even play him in that role. Those two, Payet and Tovan, are more likely to want to go for goal, so maybe have them a little bit more narrower than usual. Try something like that, maybe for the next couple of weeks, see how that works out. It's a really, really tough decision, and it shows that Marseille really needed to get a striker in the window and failed, and they're in panic mode.
Where's Stephen Fletcher when you need him?
Yeah.
So, speaking of, Rennes have their problems. Right? They're missing Mexer, they're missing Joris Nyang for this match, so they're not going to be great defensively. Maybe Marseille can come up with something. But Adam, Marseille also have problems defensively. Hiroki Sakai and Radfani are missing through suspension. Maybe is this a match for Garcia to just change tactics totally, or how valuable is this 4-3-3 in terms of his defensive aspirations?
Yeah, they're big misses, aren't they? Really, when you look at their team, and Sakai's been decent in recent games, and they've sort of found a little bit more solidity defensively with Patrice Evra coming in, and you feel like you've been more confidence in that back four now. But it's whether you think they can move to, as in, can they switch up? They've got the players to switch up that back four to perhaps a back three. I imagine Doria will play. Perhaps I've always thought perhaps Patrice Evra could be a decent shout at centre back for this Marseille side, given his experience. He's a very good defender. All right, he's decent going forward, but not perhaps the most mobile at 35. So perhaps he's someone that perhaps like Javier Mascherano has that could play in a very similar kind of role at centre back. So, and maybe you could slot Doria in at left back, and perhaps you can get around it like in that sort of sense. I think with the formation overall, you could, in the attacking sort of third, perhaps Payet as an mid, and then you could move Tuvan and perhaps Cabello or even NG into attacking roles and go with a diamond, perhaps, because that gets the best out of Payet, and perhaps then you can use the width of the fullbacks a little bit more. But then I guess without Sakai, without those players, you're going to struggle a little bit for mobility on the flanks from fullback areas. So It's a little bit the squad in general, perhaps in those areas, especially without the striker, or the reserve striker with Gomez injured. It looks perhaps a little bit lopsided. Perhaps it really is lacking. And we said, and I actually said, I think in our transfer window pod that they come out the best of the transfer window, but maybe that's in terms of covering certain areas. But perhaps other areas they're still lacking. Perhaps they do need more in defence. Only Benamo's been out for a little while and will probably be out again. So it's Huberchan. So perhaps they need a bit more cover there, and obviously they need the other striker. So I think this season is more than a little bit. It's obviously a transition season. So I wouldn't be against Rudy Garcia, experimenting a little bit. I think that's fine, perhaps because next season is going to be Marseille season, whether they make it into Europe or not. Perhaps it might be better for them that they don't, and they can go from there because they've had such a sort of a downturn. So I'd like to see Rudy Garcia experiment to some extent for this game. Whether he thinks he can move to 3 at the back or whether he moves ever inside or whether he makes use of Dora at left back is another question. So there are options there, but it's almost a bit like sort of trial and error for now at Marseille in defence. But definitely experimentation is worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because the same thing happened last season. Batshuayi was the only striker. Okay, then he's not available. Then what? You have to make do, and I don't know. You think that with this new, sporting plan and Frank McCourt, they would have learned, but
yeah.
Well, what do I know, right? So, Adam, what is your score prediction?
I'm going to go 1-1.
Okay, Nathan.
Oh God, I'm going to go 1-0 Rennes.
Way win. Rennes have not won in 9 matches. So
risky.
Breaking their duck. All right. I'm going to go with the 2-1 home win for Marseille. They have been pretty good at the Velodrome with that crowd. So Nathan, turning to you, speaking about Angers hosting Nancy, Lescaut finally have all their players back from Africa Cup of Nations. Relegation is still a real threat. Both these teams are on 27 points down the bottom of the table. Nancy have been very hard to break down this season, but have had the worst attack on the road. Have the second worst attack, in league on the road. Only 6 scores scored away from home. Does Pablo Correa stick to his guns with this negative approach, or should he put more into attack, especially with another match on the road against Caen midweek? 2 direct relegation rivals on the road in the next 2 matches.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because Angers have probably in a can we say a minor bit of form? A win at Metz, a heavy loss at Toulouse, but then a draw and then a win against Lille away from home sees them start climbing up the table finally after an awful spell. While, like you mentioned, Nancy have been not great away from home. They're not in fantastic form. They are really struggling to score goals. Just looking at the last couple of games in all competitions, they didn't score against Monaco in the Cup. No goals against Bordeaux. No goals against Bastia, the other Bastia, in the round of 32. In the French Cup, there's finally 2 against Nantes, but there's 4 conceded against Lyon in midweek, 3 against Montpellier without reply. So, yeah, they can't score goals. So, against an Angers side that are starting to maybe slightly find their feet, they've got players like Pepe who can grab you goals, and they probably could have scored a couple more at the weekend, I thought, as well. I thought they were relatively decent and put in a pretty good performance against a Lille side that here, there, and everywhere at the moment, aren't they? But yeah, this is a massive game for both of them. If I'm Correa, can you stick with your defensive guns when you've conceded 7 in the last 2 games? I maybe try and just catch them on the counter. My hope is, for them at least, the game against Caen in the midweek is maybe a little bit easier at this moment in time. I know they score goals, but they're more likely to concede. They're really porous at the back, and at the moment, you just take points in this situation, I think, from the bottom areas, because so many teams are just taking a win there and then 3 losses here, or a couple of draws in a row will make a difference, really. So I don't see why you shift away from something that's at least worked a couple of times this season. If they can hold off Angers, it'd be a really good point, I think, away from home, even though it's not going to vault them further up the table enormously, but they're both in pretty big danger. But can they hold Angers out? Is it worth it? They've not scored. They can't stop conceding. They're in that bad spiral, and at this time of the season, you worry for them now.
All right. So what is your score prediction then for this match?
1-0 Angers.
Words out of my mouth. I'll go with 2-1. Maybe Nancy will get lucky. Adam?
2-0 Angers for me.
2-0. All right. Moving on now to another battle of relegation-threatened teams. That is Caen hosting Lille. Now, Adam, this question comes to you. I know Lille are one of the teams you track for Football Radar. They brought in a swath of players in January, completely restructuring their midfield and their attack. But now they look totally at sea. They sacked Patrick Collot, brought in Frank Passi. Lille have lost all of the matches in the league, which have involved these new recruits, and have in the process up to 17th. Now, a loss here will drop them further into the playoff spot. Caen remain with a match in hand, that rescheduled match against Nancy on next Wednesday. Now, for you, is this an indictment of the quality of the players brought in, or the philosophy that is behind bringing in a bunch of younger foreign players? And this is not a xenophobic thing. It's players who don't have experience with the league. That's what I'm trying to say there. What's the issue with here? No, that's the question. Yeah, what is the issue here for you?
Yeah, it's possibly a little bit of both. I think when you say about philosophy, it's very difficult to know what the philosophy is. That perhaps they're lacking in direction in general. Gerard Lopez obviously had his sort of ownership of the club ratified by the financial authorities, who are very strict in France. If you do anything wrong, you are relegated for seemingly no reason. Bastia and Troyes before last season had trouble with them, so they're quite very strict. And it seemed that they were waiting until that happens. Well, they had to wait until they could sign anyone, and obviously that came in right at the end of the transfer window. And then they signed these 6-7 players on transfer deadline day, and it seemed like it was a little bit of a scattergun approach to recruitment. It didn't feel like there was a policy and really scouted these players, these ones that they've been had their eye on, and it just felt like quick, get some players in because we're a little bit worried about the bottom three. They're coming up quick, and we need to spend some of this money now because we can, and we want to get people bedded in. But it felt they're not. I don't know if they're necessarily bad players, but it felt like that bad choices. All quite good players, obviously, but with the right choices, it felt like they just sort of, it was a bit there they go, done, and it was a bit rushed, and perhaps that many players coming in at once a little bit, not just in terms of sort of the social dynamic of the squad, but in terms of the side in general. I've always felt that in terms of balance, Lille are quite a finely poised side, and although Eder doesn't score goals, he's the classic league striker that doesn't score goals, but I think when he's in the side, he really does add a focal point for that attack. He really does allow people to play off him. He really gives them sort of a spearhead. And when you go 4-3-1 with Nicolas Depreva as the lone striker, he's not the type of player that's going to lead the line. That's not really his game. He likes to drop off. He likes to pull wide, and he's going to support rather than be the main man to lead the attack. So I think leaving Eder out, I know he's been injured, but they left him out for the game on the 4th of February, but obviously he's been injured, so maybe he is still the main man. But without him and those players coming in, I think it's sort of a combination of both, because especially an attack that really does balanced and very sort of weak. So I think it's partially those players coming in as well, but Eder is a big factor in terms of sort of the wider picture. To know where these players are coming from, because obviously Gerard Lopez is quite new, and whether he's overseeing the scouting situation, and whether there's sort of things that he's driving and his team is driving, I don't know. Or Mark Inger is involved with, and the Bielsa link is interesting. Perhaps there's some sort of, and he's saying these are the players that sort of lacking in direction at the moment for Lille, which is disappointing, because they are being sucked towards the bottom three. You don't expect them to get relegated because on paper there's still some very good players there. Amadou was missed against Angers, he was rested. Korchard's still brilliant, and Yarma's a fantastic goalkeeper. Players like Depreva, El Ghazi's come in and looked inconsistent, but they're going to get you goals. So you'd expect them to be at least three worst teams in this league. But the disarray they seem to be in at the moment could really suck them in. So that there's no reason that no wonder they're a little bit worried about it. And the final thing of this is Frank Passy. I think it's a very odd appointment. And if you want someone to keep you in the league, do you really think Frank Passy is the man? I don't know. I know that Kulow's inexperienced, but he had got them playing, and it felt like this upsetting balance that happened over the transfer window was the main issue, rather Patrick Kulo, who had done well. He got them playing, he got them playing exciting football, got the best out of players like City, Prayville. They were looking good under him. So it felt like maybe a bit hasty to I know that they'd been in some average form at best, but to say that Frank Prassi's a step up from Patrick Kulo is for me is a bit of a jump. So I think there's a lot of questions to be answered, and I think we'll find out perhaps most of them in the summer, assuming they stay up, which I imagine they will. It's just lacking in direction. They need that philosophy, and if Bielsa comes in, they'll have it. But it'll all depend on that next manager whether this would be worth it or not.
Yeah, I have to say that I fully agree with you on the appointment of Colo. I mean, the team are 11th before these new players come in, and 3 matches later, they've lost them all. They're down 17th, and yeah, that 4-2-3-1 with Benzia off of that era did look really good, and it's you know I don't know. It's not like you can't come back from League Two. I mean, Lille, you know, would be a favorite to come back up, but we've seen League Two this season be a real dogfight for promotion. I mean, the bigger teams you'd expect to come up, like a Reims, for example, have really struggled. I mean, Reims kept a lot of their more important players and have really struggled to break away. Brest or League de leader right now, but there's a whole pack of teams below them. Amiens have been a total surprise. So, I mean, relegation. I've seen some people downplay what happened if Lille were to be relegated, but I think it could be, you know, something like Sochaux or Auxerre, but it could take them quite a while to come back up. The score predictions then, I'll go with a 1-1 draw for Caen versus Lille. Adam?
I'm going to say 0-0.
Okay. And Nathan?
2-2.
2-2. All right. Caen have scored goals on occasion this season. It could happen. So finally, we are going to speak about Montpellier hosting Saint-Etienne. Now, the question we should focus on Montpellier. Montpellier looked really bright last week against Nancy. That's their first road win of the season. Does a win here, which would take them on to 32 points, make them safe, or do we still need to hold our breath? Nathan, I'll come on to you for this.
32 points. Looking at the table right now, it probably just about makes them safe. I think with the amount of teams below them, especially if the results go their way, I mean, I think the favourites to win their game in hand. So say they come with them, but if the rest of the results like Dijon and maybe Angers, Nancy draw, it probably just puts too many teams between them and the drop zone. And you're right in saying that it was a much better performance at the weekend against Nancy, and they have been better in the last couple of weeks. They played really well in the second half against Monaco, where they caused them some real problems and maybe could have nicked a point on another day. It was a good win against Bastia, and they are starting to slowly pick up again, I think. I thought Isaac Mbenza was really good. He looks like an interesting player that they've brought in. Mooney got his goal as well, and I think he's an important player going forward. He, like you've mentioned before, Eric, he's really exciting. He does excellent work up front. He works hard. He looks for space in behind and can be a real threat in the air and on the ground. And when you've got a player like Riyad Boudebouz who creates 2 assists again, he's a wonderful footballer. He's a real asset to a team like that I can't imagine a team with a player that talented going down, because he dictates things sometimes. He created 2 wonderful little goals. And yeah, they found a groove against Nancy. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be that easy against Saint-Etienne, who are incredibly stern in defence, as we know. And they played pretty well for 60 minutes tonight, at least. A win will be massive. Whether they get it is another question entirely. But they certainly have the talent, and they've shown in the last couple of weeks that they can put the cat amongst the pigeons when they want to.
All right. Adam, final question of the program for you. After this somewhat disheartening result against Manchester United, we have seen, though, despite the loss, Saint-Etienne play more positively in recent weeks. Now, how high for you can they go? And accepting the weekend's match against Montpellier, is 4th realistic? And what about next season?
Yeah, I have a feeling that it is realistic, but it's going to be very, very difficult for them to finish as high as 4th. But it's definitely a target that they can aim at. I have a feeling that for Gautier, the club being an ambitious club, he's the longest-serving manager in League One. I may have said this before on the pod a number of times, but this season is a test to see whether he's taken the club as far as he can take it. And I think Saint-Etienne as a club feel they should be challenging for top 3, even though not getting it, but they should be close, and they should be making the knockout stage of the Europa League, perhaps going beyond this round. Obviously, the tie of Manchester United is a bit of a glamour tie, and I think they've kind of achieved their targets in the Europa League now, even though they're probably going to go out. You know, I think that's fine. If they had an easier tie, I think the hierarchy would be expecting, another round perhaps to show some progression on previously when, of course, they lost to Basel very narrowly. So I think Europa League is, fine in terms of Gautier's, targets for this season. But I think for the league, if they finish 5th or 6th, they don't get into Europa League again, for this season, for next season, sorry, and they're a long way off 3rd. Then, which they are at the moment, they're 14 points off Nice in 3rd, which seems like, I don't see them making that gap up. I think Gautier will be questioned quite a lot. But if they can finish 4th, if they can beat Lyon to that position and they make it back into Europa League, perhaps without a qualifying round, then it'd just be enough for Zinedine to say, Gautier will get another season, or at least for Gautier to himself to say that there's still life in this team and this squad that he's built and that the club have built. So I think it's still realistic. Leon is stuttering. I think Nathan's right when Genesio's he is sort of his days numbered a little bit at Leon. Like, you feel like he's not going to be able to pull them back to the form they had at their peak last season when he really revitalised them after Fournier went. So I think there's very much race on between those two teams, and perhaps Zinedine will target finishing above their rivals as a decent return in what's been a very difficult season. But that squad still needs to be improved if Gautier is going to really push on towards that 3rd place, or deeper into Europa League, which is what their long term or their medium term targets are. So yes, but difficult to achieve.
All right, so what would be your score prediction then, Adam?
I'm going to go 1-0 Saint-Etienne.
Okay. Nathan?
I'm going to go 1-1.
Okay, I'm going to go for 2-1 home win for Montpellier. I think they're in good form, and some of the emotional energy might have been sucked out of Saint-Etienne after today's result. Yeah. Well, thanks again, gents. We did run a little bit long today, but I think some worthwhile discussion of PSG and their future. For Nathan Staples and Adam White, I've been Eric Devin. This is the Get French Football News preview show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at at GFFN on Twitter, and to visit us online at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com. Thank you, and we will speak with you Monday. Nathan has the main show going live from 8 o'clock UK. Thank you, and have a pleasant weekend.